Out of all the Simpson family members, Maggie is perhaps the only one with any true potential or talent. This is why a baby like her should have a mafia boss as a godfather. But will this new influence actually help Maggie, or turn her into some sort of a cutthroat boss baby?
Welcome to the family.
The Simpson family heads over to a knockoff of the wizarding world of Harry Potter. There is everything a nerd could dream of: special drinks, characters from the movies, and even special food. It's the perfect place for people who never learned how to grow up and move on from their interests. As Homer and the rest of the family walk around, they come across an act which is definitely not a cheap copy of the Harry Potter sorting hat and houses. At first, Homer does not want to participate, but the minute his results are a favourable house, Homer loses his shit and acts like he has just won the lottery.
Congratulations, you're a Grizzledom.
Yes, finally, a head that respects me.
Now that Homer is part of Grizzledom, he thinks that his entire life is set, and that only winners like him are allowed to be in Grizzledom. But every popular clique has an equally insufferable opposing group, and Homer finds himself running into the Pufflesnuffs. Pufflesnuff is basically a version of Slytherin, so that the show does not get sued. The Pufflesnuff guys start making fun of Homer for being such a fat mess. They are ruthless in their insults, but Lisa reminds Homer that these guys are just paid actors, and they are not really being mean to him. However, if Homer actually stopped to think about his actions, a lot of the show wouldn't exist right now, and he immediately punches the Pufflesnuff guys before hearing Lisa. It turns out that these Pufflesnuffs do not joke around either, and a huge fight ensues, one in which Homer is clearly outclassed and outnumbered. As Homer runs around the amusement park embarrassing his family, Marge decides to call Grandpa Abe to make sure that the senile grandfather is actually taking care of the little toddler. Even though Grandpa Abe doesn't even remember that World War I has ended, he assures Marge that Maggie is safe and sound and doing kids things.
We're at the beach. I better put on sunscreen.
The family continues their exploration of the park, and soon, Homer finds himself in his worst nightmare: the dreaded gift store.
Oh, finally, a place to spend money.
Both Lisa and Bart make sure their father will go bankrupt by buying them overly expensive and cheap merchandise that is meant to lure people in with a false sense of satisfaction. The family finally returns from their trip, and it looks like Grandpa Abe did a great job of taking care of Maggie, but the old man is not taking care of Maggie at all. He is taking care of the cat, and Maggie is nowhere to be seen. The entire family frantically searches for the only smart person in the family, and thankfully, Ned Flanders comes to the rescue. He managed to keep Maggie safe while the family was gone.
Oh, my sweet baby.
For the first time in his life, Homer is grateful to Ned. The family will never trust Grandpa Abe with babysitting ever again, but Ned proposes a solution. All Maggie needs is a good old-fashioned Christian baptism, and then she can have a godfather that will take care of her. However, Ned is horrified to learn that Maggie has never been baptized, and if the kid died right now, she'll immediately get kicked to hell for her shitty parents. Yes, that is definitely what God would do. Marge is willing to baptize Maggie if Ned becomes her godfather, but as God's right-hand man. Ned is too busy being a godfather to other children. Later on, Marge worries about the fate of her child, but she still forces her to fall asleep. Sleeping while being worried about something turns out to be a huge mistake, because all night, Marge has terrible dreams of Maggie going to hell and becoming a menace. She even sees Bart in her dreams, but he is willingly in hell, trying to become good friends with Satan.
Nice and unbaptized. She'll play in an unsanitary ball pit for all eternity.
Marge's fever dream prompts her to wake up and immediately get Maggie baptized. She is even willing to make Patty or Selma the godmother of their child, but they are missing a godfather. And Marge believes that it is Homer's responsibility to find a classy, responsible godfather for their child. So of course, Homer heads over to Moe's Tavern to find a godfather, because his alcoholic friends are the best people to take care of his child. Even Homer himself quickly realizes that none of his friends are worthy to be godfathers for Maggie, and with all of his options exhausted, Homer gives up on the search entirely because it's not like Maggie is going to be dying anytime soon. However, as soon as Homer thinks that Maggie has a long life ahead of her, a heavy, falling piano almost crushes the infant and her father, and the man to save them is none other than Fat Tony himself. Homer is grateful for Fat Tony's help, but he also puts two and two together and realizes that on top of being a rich mafia boss, Fat Tony is protective and also religious. Homer believes that Fat Tony is the perfect godfather, but he isn't the family-friendly type of godfather that Maggie needs. Homer tries his best to skirt around the issue, but Fat Tony basically forces himself to become Maggie's godfather, and he is glad that Homer made him an offer he could never refuse. When Marge learns of this new development, she's not too keen on having Fat Tony around her child, but the family has no other option, and soon Fat Tony starts showering the family with gifts so that he can be closer to Maggie and actually protect her. The man has never had a child, but he already bought Maggie a better car seat compared to the death trap her parents were using. And Fat Tony even gives Marge a new, safer SUV so that she can drive around with Maggie without worrying about killing her child.
And you, the mama, will drive her more safely in this Luxus SUV I have leased in your name.
Even though the SUV is exactly the type of bribe that Marge really wants to yield to, she still has doubts about making Fat Tony the godfather. However, having a mafia connection in the world can be quite advantageous, and soon, Maggie's baptism proceeds with Fat Tony as her godfather and Selma as her godmother. At least one godparent is competent. After the baptism, Marge only needs to get through with the dinner, and then they will probably never see Fat Tony again. But the mafia guy isn't going anywhere. He intends on starting with Maggie's religious studies and makes sure to get her well acquainted with all the religious figures that helped him become a mafia boss.
You gotta love a religion with merch.
Even though Marge still has her reservations about Fat Tony, she loves her new car even more, and the entire family eagerly enjoys this new commodity because it is the nicest vehicle the Simpsons will ever see in their lifetime. Even Fat Tony's henchmen have been roped into the Godfather business. Instead of killing people and counting money, the men have to watch over Maggie.
Here you go, baby boss.
Soon, even Maggie is respected on the tough streets of the playground, and her and Fat Tony are inseparable. Fat Tony refuses to discuss any grisly matters in front of Maggie, and spends most of his time being cute and sensitive with the baby. Fat Tony's men know that their boss has gone soft, but there is nothing that can be done. Now that Fat Tony has let down his defenses, the other members of the mafia believe that something should be done. Even Marge is worried that Maggie seems changed. However, none of that matters because Maggie has been accepted into a prestigious preschool, and it's all thanks to Fat Tony's influence. Homer and Marge continue to tolerate the mafia infiltrating their lives, but Homer receives one final shock when he realizes that Fat Tony expects the entire family to attend church every single Sunday. As Maggie's godfather, Fat Tony will not let the family skip out on Sunday service. Homer knew that dealing with a mafia boss could only lead to terrible things, and now he has to waste away a perfectly good morning pretending to care about God. Homer realizes the mistake that he has made, and the entire family wants out. After church, Marge is determined to have Homer speak with Fat Tony, but the right moment just never arrives. In fact, Fat Tony keeps showering the family with more presents, which makes it difficult for Homer to rip off the Band-Aid and get Maggie back. Fat Tony himself has changed quite a bit as well. Instead of laundering money like a normal mafia boss, he actually opens a legitimate business and is now selling baby products.
This is the first business I've had where in the back room is just more of the same.
The henchmen can no longer bear to see their boss act so foolishly, and they decide to do something about the Maggie situation. Even Marge tries to speak with Fat Tony, and when she sees her own daughter acting like a mafia boss, Marge bluntly tells Fat Tony that he can no longer be near her daughter. Instead of killing everyone on the spot, Fat Tony is level-headed about the situation. He shares with Homer that he wants to stop doing illegal things and get into the world of maternity clothes. This is why Fat Tony wants one more day to prove to the family that he is not some drug-dealing, people-killing maniac. Homer admires the man's motives and decides to give him a chance. The following day, Marge and the kids drive over to the itchy and scratchy show that Fat Tony invited them to. Even the mafia henchmen are all ready to get their boss back, no matter what, and the stage is set. The show begins and everyone has a good time watching gratuitous violence. During the show, Marge tries talking to Fat Tony, and she, horrifying, learns that the man bought out the entire arena just for Maggie. Marge is worried that they will never be rid of the mafia thug, and she begs the man to leave her family alone. Marge even offers to turn into Fat Tony's personal maid, but that offer is not good enough. Fat Tony is just too attached to Maggie. However, the show takes an unexpected turn when one of Fat Tony's henchmen decides to shoot his mafia boss. This betrayal really brings out the real Fat Tony. The man pulls out his gun and starts beating the traitor. But in this process, he realizes that Maggie is witnessing the entire ordeal. Fat Tony realizes that he can never change who he truly is and decides to give up being Maggie's godfather. But for a moment, he is still grateful that he got to spend time with a child who could also be a great mafia boss in the future. It was interesting and funny seeing Maggie as a future mobster, just like the time she had an army of animals looking for revenge. If you want to see what happens, click on this video next, but not before you smash those like and subscribe buttons.